Hi, I'm Christina, and this is a book review of Apples Never Fall by Liane Moriarty. So this is a contemporary novel with mystery elements, and it was published in 2021. Now, this is my fourth book by this author, and I have to say she's a bit of a hit and miss author for me. So the very first book that I read by her was Big Little Lies, and I absolutely loved that book. It's one of my favourite books of all time. Definite 5-star read, just absolutely wonderful. And then I read The Husband's Secret by her, which I enjoyed. I gave that one 3 stars. It was a good read. And then I read 9 Perfect Strangers by her, and I really disliked that book. I just thought it was awful. And in a similar kind of vein, I didn't really like this one, unfortunately. Now, I have to say, for the first kind of half of the story, I was really enjoying it. It was going to be a 3-star read, perhaps a 4-star read, depending on how it all kind of turned out. But, it just really kind of fell off a cliff for me at the end, this one, to be honest. So let me tell you a little bit about the story. We are focused on the Delaney family. We have husband and wife, Joy and Stan. Joy is 69 and I think Stan is 70, and they have 4 adult children. They have Amy, Logan, Troy and Brooke, and the entire family is heavily involved in tennis. They've all been competitive tennis players, and the husband and wife duo did run Delaney's tennis academy for a very long time, and tennis really underpinned the entire family. It was their hobby, it was their passion, it was their career, it was their livelihood and their business. So it was everything. So this book is very heavy on the tennis, which I thought was quite interesting. And all of the different characters are very interesting. You see lots of different perspectives throughout this, and there are very kind of complicated family dynamic to follow. So that was very interesting. And all of the characters felt very believable, very real. They just felt like a normal kind of family that could exist somewhere in Australia, running this tennis academy. So the premise of the story is Joy, the mother, goes missing, and the question the children have to ask themselves is, would you report your mother missing if you thought your father might have murdered her? And that's kind of the central crux of this story. That is the mystery element to this story. And it started okay. It started interestingly enough. She goes out on a bike to buy some apples, and she just seems to disappear after that, and we don't quite know what has happened to Joy. And a lot of the story is going back in time to see what actually had gone on. And another kind of central character in this story is a young woman named Savannah, who one day just knocks on their door and just turns up out of thin air, and she kind of becomes a part of their lives after that. So the first kind of mystery element is, what did happen to Joy? And the second kind of mystery element is, who is Savannah? Where has she come from? And why is she here, essentially? And I think both of those questions were really disappointing once we found out the answer to them. Now, it's going to be very difficult for me to say so much why I didn't enjoy this without going into spoiler territory, and I never normally talk about spoilers at all because I don't want to ruin the book for anyone, but I think that this is more of a rant review, so I'm going to actually talk about a few spoilers in this one, just because I can't explain why I didn't like it without kind of explaining what actually happens. So if you do want to read this book, please do just stop the video now so I don't give anything away. So if you're still here, I'm going to start talking about some spoilers. So for me, I'm just going to give this one a 2-star. It was going to be a 3-star for a lot of the time, and then I just bumped it down to a 2-star right at the end. And I think that is mainly because I just found this so unbelievable. There were so many things in here, and I was just like, really? Is that how we're going to explain that away? And I just didn't enjoy the kind of twists and turns and where they've come from. So some of them were just implausible, a bit silly, a bit ridiculous, and I will give you some examples. So Joy is actually alive. That's the main first big spoiler. So really, not very much had actually happened at all. The whole kind of central question was, what has happened to Joy? And she's okay. She's alive. And she's basically just gone away for 3 weeks on a spontaneous holiday with Savannah, the woman who basically blackmailed them. She said that her husband Stan had been sexually inappropriate towards her, and then she lied about a few other things, and then she also blackmailed the the son with the most wealth to get something out of the family. And anyway, Joy decides to go on holiday with this woman after that. And what she does is she doesn't tell anyone specifically that she's going on holiday, but she does send a garbled text message to her 4 children, but she doesn't put her glasses on when she's doing this, so the text doesn't really make any sense. And then to tell her husband where she's going to go, she decides to write a note and put it on the fridge. But what she does is she uses a fridge magnet that is too heavy, so the note slips off the fridge. And then they have a dog who eats a lot of paper because he's very anxious, and then the dog eats the note. So the major crux of this story is what happened to Joy and why does nobody know where she is? Was she disappeared? Has she been murdered? Was it Stan? Was it somebody else? No, she just left a note on the fridge which fell on the floor and got eaten by the dog. Oh, it was a bit weak and I didn't really like it. And the other kind of terms of evidence, it was a bit silly. So at one point they have found her favourite t-shirt with some flowers on that her son's girlfriend has purchased for her, and it's one of her favourite t-shirts. Anyway, that t-shirt is found covered in her blood, like drenched in her blood, buried in the woods outside their house, which sounds like pretty damning evidence, to be honest, that someone has hurt Joy and she's not okay. And the answer for that is, when they went to the beach one day, Joy cut her foot on a shell. And so she used this t-shirt to kind of get rid of the blood, and then she decided to just throw this t-shirt in the bin. And now the next door neighbour has a cat that notoriously steals clothes and items of underwear, and the cat steals this and then buries it in the house, but in the woods behind the house. So we've got one big twist is the dog ate the note, and another big twist is next door's cat stole and buried the top. Oh, it just seemed a little bit unlikely. And the other kind of big thing that was kind of like, ooh, evidence, is that the next door neighbour's CCTV camera has got Stan on footage rolling something very, very large into his boot to dispose of it. Turns out it's not a body, it's just the purple carpet that Joy had always hated that was actually his mother's carpet that she'd chosen, and he decided to just get rid of it one day, a couple of days after she disappeared. And in a similar vein, he also spent $400 cleaning the car a couple of days after her disappearance, which sounds really, really guilty, obviously, but the story behind that was, not too long before, Joy had bought banana milkshakes and they'd gone on a drive, and Stan had slammed the brakes on. Banana milkshake had gone everywhere and the whole car smelled like sour milk, and she'd been banging on about it for ages and she wanted him to clean it, and then he finally does. So all of these things that kind of have been built up to be something just kind of turn out to be nothing, silly little, ridiculous little things. When I was just sitting down and thinking, so the major kind of crux of this story and the things that you really think are, you know, she's disappeared without a trace, there's no note, something's happened to her, that's because of the dog. Oh, the t-shirt, that's because of the cat. I was just, oh, I don't know. I feel like Liane Moriarty's later books just don't have the magic of her earlier books. I thought Big Little Lies was just absolutely fantastic, and The Husband's Secret was really, really good too. I really enjoyed it. And then the most recent one, this one was it's not good. I don't think it's good. And the one before, Nine Perfect Strangers, I didn't think that was good either. I think actually this is better than Nine Perfect Strangers. Just about, I really didn't like Nine Perfect Strangers. So to rank all her books that I've read so far, I would say obviously number 1 is definitely Big Little Lies, and if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend you read it because it really is wonderful. It's so well written, wonderful characters, and it's just so great, honestly. And then The Husband's Secret is definitely worth a read too if you're interested in it. I think this one and Nine Perfect Strangers are just worth a miss, to be honest. My other kind of criticism would be it's just overly long, to be honest. It's a very, very long book. There's over how many pages? There's nearly 500 pages here, 485, which is quite long for just like a normal kind of contemporary book. I feel like this really could have done with a little bit more editing, just to kind of make it a bit more concise, a bit more snappy, just kind of kept my attention span. It took me a long time to read this book. It was a bit of a drag. It was a bit of a slow drag to get this one read, to be honest, and to get it finished. So that was a shame. I think maybe cutting maybe 100 or so pages off this, it would have been a lot more, I don't know, much more of an exciting read. And I don't think you would have lost too much of the character development and all of those kind of things. So yeah, I just think it was a little bit overly long. The other things and I didn't like about it, I think this was going to be genuinely a 3-star read, it was good, until the last couple of chapters. So basically the whole story gets wrapped up and we're done with that. We found out about Savannah, we found out about Joy, we've done all of that. And then it decides to do like a whole bit on COVID for some reason. So the pandemic was absolutely nothing to do with this story at all. And then all of a sudden we just start talking about the pandemic at the end of the book. It kind of felt maybe she just tacked it on at the end to be a little bit more like relevant of the times. I just didn't like the way that was done. I thought like, oh yeah, the story's finished, we're good, it's over. I wonder what we're going to talk about now. And then all of a sudden it was just like, let's just talk about the pandemic for a while. And it just felt so just arbitrary. It didn't really feel connected. I just had no idea. I had no idea why we were talking about the pandemic at the end of the story, because we'd already concluded the story. We'd answered both of our big questions about the mystery, and the whole kind of like family was back together, everyone was doing okay, and I was just like, yeah, I feel like that was a good conclusion. I don't think we needed the last bit. And then the final bits with Savannah, not quite sure. She was a kind of an unusual character throughout. I didn't really like her as a character, which you're obviously not supposed to. She's one of those kind of unreliable narrator kind of ideas, but they just kind of completely changed her character at the end. So all the way through, you knew she was someone who was a liar. She lied very, very often. She lied about the fact that her boyfriend was abusing her, which wasn't true. She lied about most of her past. She said she was brought up in foster care, but she wasn't. She said loads of things that weren't true. She said some things that were true, but kind of like exaggerated them in a way. And you can obviously tell that she's quite a mentally unstable girl. She's definitely had a lot of horrors in her past. Her mother was very abusive towards her. She does have an eating disorder. She's got a lot of things going on, and she kind of is maybe a bit down of her luck, and she just kind of wants to maybe take advantage of the Delaney's. I thought she was living with them. She was kind of living there for free. She was just cooking and cleaning. She didn't have to have a job. She didn't really have to do anything else. And she did some blackmail with Troy, and that was kind of her character. And then all of a sudden in the last kind of bit, it was like, oh, maybe she murdered her mum too. I mean, it just kind of completely came out of left field, to be honest. And I don't know if her mother did die or not, but she locked her in a room with a certain amount of food and water, and I think we ought to presume that she has died, and that is kind of in punishment for what the mother used to do to her when she was a child. She used to lock her in a room as well with not much food or water either, but she's kind of gone for maybe 2/3 of a year by the time she comes back. And honestly, when I was reading that, I was like, is this a whole new book? Is this just a whole other idea that you just wanted to tack on the end of this story? Because I was like, I just don't know where we've come from here. It didn't seem to completely align with her character. It kind of felt like she was a certain type of character, and we kind of like cranked it up a notch right at the end, and she was a whole other kind of character. And I was like, I didn't see that coming. I'm not quite sure why it's here, why it's relevant. Yeah, and the whole coronavirus last chapter, I was not on board with that. I feel like both of those two things at the end, we'd already concluded the story, and I feel like neither one of them actually added anything to the reading experience. I don't think it really added anything at all. I mean, for me, it just took things away. I was just sitting there going, why is any of this happening? So yes, that's my thoughts on this one. So it's just a 2-star read. I was going back and forth about whether I was being a bit too harsh and just give it 3 stars, but honestly, I just thought so much of it was just so unbelievable and just so unlikely, and it just doesn't have the magic of Big Little Lies. I wouldn't have thought the same person would have written this book, to be honest. And yeah, if your major kind of plot points and twists and reveals are the dog ate the note and the cat stole the top and buried it, and oh, there was another thing as well that was kind of interesting. So in the very beginning, it's kind of like she's disappeared, but her bike is there. And you're like, oh, someone's going to spot the bike. Well, actually, no, because this man drives up, sees the bike. It's the day after Valentine's Day, and he didn't give his girlfriend a present. So he thinks, okay, I'll steal that bike and give it to her as a present. So he does. And then maybe 10 minutes later, he dies in a car crash and the bike's never seen from ever again. And I thought that was going to be some kind of interesting setup about, oh, maybe we're going to find out the bike or something. But no, we're just like, we were done with that and we're just going to move on from that. And the other part in the story where her next door neighbour and kind of her best friend's daughter gives her a lift to the place she's going with Savannah on holiday. That never really came to any kind of fruition because she'd gone back home and she didn't actually tell it to her mum, and they'd had a lot of things going on, and it just kind of slipped her mind that she'd seen her, and no one had told her, oh, Joy's been missing for 3 weeks. I think what was strange was it was Joy's best friend and her next door neighbour, and she's been missing for 3 whole weeks, and she hasn't even bothered to tell her daughter that. I feel like that's one of the biggest things you might, if you were like talking to your children who had moved away, I feel like you might have mentioned, by the way, my best friend of 30 years and our next door neighbour is missing, and she could be presumed dead, and we're wondering if it's the husband. But no, she just doesn't mention it at all. She just never mentions it until maybe 3 weeks later when it's all wrapped up, and she's like, oh no, I took her, it was fine, I could have told you she was fine. So anyway, I think that's enough of that, because I'll just keep ranting on about this for absolutely ages. So I actually have been ranting on about this for absolutely ages. So if you have read this book, I would love to know what you thought of it down in the comments below. If you have any kind of thoughts on any of the kind of spoilers, just put in brackets spoilers so we don't ruin the book for anyone. Just in case, obviously, other people might enjoy this very much. When I was having a look on Goodreads, there's so many 5-star reviews, so many 4 and 5-star reviews of people loving it. So if you have loved it, I'm so pleased that you enjoyed it and you really enjoyed it. I'm really happy, but I just didn't like it. So yeah, that was that one. So thank you so much for watching. Please do like the video if you've liked it, and please do subscribe if you'd like to see more of me talking about books. I'll see you in my next one.